It's early winter, but there are still lots of jobs to do in the garden. So here's a quick roundup of a few things to do now. Hi, my name's Jane Moore and I'm a professional gardener and author. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and to hit the little bell at the bottom as well so you get a notification every time I release a new video. Right, let's get going. You'll be really pleased to hear that my first job is to do nothing. Seriously, let things go a little bit. Don't be in too much of a hurry to cut everything back. Partly, these things look good. Look at these seed heads. They're fantastic. These are asters that have gone over, and I love these little fluffy seed heads. And more importantly, so do the birds and lots of little creatures as well. By helping to feed the birds in these sort of winter months when things are starting to get really a bit tight for them, you are doing absolute wonders for wildlife. A lot of small birds like robins don't make it through the winter just simply because they have not got enough food. So by leaving the seed heads for just a bit longer, you are actually providing them with a plentiful supply of food. Of course, you can always top that up with some extra food on a bird table and perhaps some feeders hanging about as well. It all helps. But for the meantime, these seeds will really go a long way. And the great thing about having lots of birds in your garden is that birds eat pests. So the more birds you have, the less pests you have. You don't get off that easily though. My next job is a bit more physical because it's mulching and top dressing. This is a really good time of the year to do these jobs because you can let the earthworms do all the hard work for you. They can take all the nutrients down and do the digging in for you. And I've got some lovely stuff in the compost heap here. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Really good compost. And we compost pretty much everything, and all the twiggy stuff, all that sort of thing. If we can, we shred it, chop it into little bits, but it all goes in the compost heap. And eventually, quite quickly actually, it'll rot down, and we usually make sort of like 2 or 3 batches of compost every year. So the secret is regular turning, I think. But back to the mulching. So this stuff I am going to be putting on the veg beds, on greedy feeders like strawberries and roses and peonies, things like that. They will all really enjoy a top dress of compost, and it makes them look really nice for the winter as well. Talking about roses, it's a really good time of the year to prune your roses back a bit. I know usually you leave it until maybe the spring or something, but actually roses can get really damaged this time of the year. They kind of rock about in the wind and it loosens the base of the rose, and then water can get in, and before you know it, that water freezes and it damages the roots. And so it's actually a really good time of the year to just take your roses back a bit. I usually take them back about half. I kind of do a mostly prune, and then if anything in the spring I just go over it again and just have a little bit more of a tidy up. But I do take some of these long stems off. This sort of thing, I will definitely cut it back by about half. And what you're doing is going for an outward facing bud as well. So you are doing most of the job. probably do that. I'm a little bit tentative, a little bit, because I don't want to, if the frost gets in, they can die back a little bit more. But usually I find that roses are pretty tough and actually they'll cope with it. So as I say, in the spring, the buds start shooting and you can just have a further little tidy up. As always, you're kind of going for that sort of open goblet shape. So important to let the air get in. Roses are terribly prone to diseases, and so you need to make sure that the airflow is going in around the plant, keeps them happier and much, much healthier. A nice indoor job for this time of the year is to get the last of the bulbs in. Don't worry if you're feeling like you've left it a bit late. A lot of these bulbs prefer a period of cold. It seems to help them in terms of their health and vigour. Tulips particularly only start getting going and putting roots down now, really. Look, they're just starting to sprout. So it's fine to leave them this late. You don't want to leave it much later, but they do have a habit of sort of kind of catching up with themselves anyway. And in fact, it's a bit of a mistake to put them in too early, because you know we can sort of often get those warmish days in September and early October, and that actually is absolutely rife for diseases to get a bit of a hold. And tulips, bless them, they are a little bit prone to fungal diseases. So you really, leaving them a little bit later is better. One of my favourite ways of planting tulips is actually in pots. I think they look great in pots. You don't want to go for too small a pot because they are big growers. So this is probably about the smallest pot I would go for. This tulip negrita is about 40 centimetres tall, so I think that'll be proportionately quite good. If you go for too tall a tulip in too small a pot, they just look wrong. So I'm going to go for that. You can plant your bulbs in layers, and they call it a bulb lasagna. I'm not wild about it personally. I think that they often push up and you end up with sort of like the foliage of one bulb when the new bulb is coming, the flower is coming through. And I just doesn't do it for me. So I'd rather keep one plant per pot, really. And so I have a selection of pots. I've got a few sort of irises and things like that I've done for earlier. They're in smaller pots. And then I've got these slightly bigger pots that I do a few tulips in. So I've already put a crock in the bottom just to cover up that drainage hole, that all important drainage hole. And then I'm just going to put in some compost. You don't really need to use bulb fibre. You can if you want to, but it's not really necessary. Actually, a lot of the peat-free composts work brilliantly for bulbs because they do have that slightly sort of coarser texture. So I've got a good layer of compost in there, and then I'm going to pop the bulbs in, keeping them reasonably well spaced apart. So you don't want them actually touching one another. You want to keep them so that there's a good amount of space between them because of those fungal diseases I mentioned. So I'm not going to get that many in this pot, but that's okay because that means I have got plenty more pots where this came from. And I think they look great when they're in a cluster. So I'll probably get another one in there. Just rearrange slightly. They don't need to be miles apart, they just need to be not quite touching. So there we go. So that's what we've got. The crucial thing with the bulbs is that they need to be 3 times the depth beneath the compost. So you want another 2 bulbs worth of compost on top of this bulb, on top of the bulb. It's quite easy with an old pot like this one because it's got a mark where the compost was before, so that much makes it quite easy. And then I'm just going to top it off with, as I just said, that couple of bulbs worth layers of compost on the top. So I've got it all topped off now, and then just firm it down a little bit just to make a nice sort of smooth surface. And then I just top it off with a little bit of gravel or grit, or even just some silver sand, just to make it sort of look nice. I've got a little bit of pink horticultural grit here, and it just makes a nice layer, and it stops the compost developing a sort of crust on it as well, so that you end up with a nicely drained surface, but it allows the tulips to push through as the spring starts to come on. Well, that's it for the moment, and I hope to see you next time.